Today, I'm going to make a World War II diorama, but not just any World War II diorama. I want to get weird. And by weird, I mean occult weird, aliens weird, glowing orbs in the fields weird. So suspend the bolt counting for just a little bit and come with me to the fields of Northwest Europe for a weird discovery. I used to read a lot of World War II comics when I was a kid. My favorite was Sergeant Rock. In the back of those Sergeant Rock books, they would have what I believe were cuts from a 70s series called Weird War Tales. And it was stuff like zombies and vampires. I was always really obsessed with those kind of war stories. Just mixing that weirdness in with the day-to-day reality of, the war itself. So I was walking my dogs the other day and I came across this weird looking rock. And it reminded me of, I don't know if you remember this, but a few years back there was that mysterious shiny black monolith that appeared somewhere, I think in like Death Valley or somewhere out in the desert. But I got the idea to make this, monolith in somewhere in the fields of northwestern Europe, and a couple GIs out on patrol stumble across it. I needed a little bit more than a monolith. I wanted to make it some sort of occult or alien or both kind of thing. And so I got the idea for an orb sitting in the midst of this little shiny black monolith somewhere in a field in Europe. And thus, a diorama idea was born. So I did what you do with dioramas. I mapped out my layout. I got the Proxon out and cut up the old XPS foam. After I cut the styrofoam for the base, I carved out some flagstones. I wanted to have some, flat stones surrounding the monolith, kind of making it leading on a path leading up to it, sort of like it's some kind of altar or something like that. And with my flat stones cut out, I rounded the edges a little bit and I just stuck them down in the terrain paste while it was still wet to kind of give it a little bit of glue there. Now in hindsight, I probably should have used a little bit denser foam because the pink foam that I'm using here is sort of porous. It's great for bases. It's not as great for like stonework and stuff like that, but it's fine. I'm gonna make it work. And then I carved out a hole for my monolith because I want to make sure it's really secure in there. And then I got out the old Sculptamold and mixed it up and covered the surface of the foam. Probably could have skipped this step because I don't know that you really need it, and Sculptamold takes a while to dry. And then I covered the top of that once it was dry with AK Dry Earth terrain paste, which you can see here. And then, pretty typical diorama steps. I got some dirt and grass cuttings out, sprinkled it on there, glued it in place. And then because this is a field in the summer sometime in 1944 in Northwest Europe, I wanted to have some tall grass, so I used some sisal twine, cut it up. And I also used some natural hair fiber paintbrush just to kind of mix up the textures a little bit. Cut those kind of long and glued them in place on the diorama. Made a little patch of tall grass off to the side and then a few other spots where there's some tall grass in there too. And then once the tall grass was in place, I came back and used just some plain little tufts from AK. Include those in place. That kind of made it look like, some clumps of grass growing out between the stones and just some more random vegetation. And I added too, which you'll see later, I don't actually have video of it, but I also added some, little bushes I had into the mix here just to give it a little varied vegetation. The next thing I wanted to do was give the stone a little bit of a black base coat. So I just used some basic cheap acrylic paint that I got from like a craft store. And then, static grass time. You can't have a diorama in Northwest Europe without a little static grass now, can you? Also made sure to kind of get that around the back side of where the tall grass is, so it's looks nice and even and not tall grass appearing out of nowhere. Now I messed up the steps a little bit here. You got to do this, paint the surface before you do the grass, I think is a little bit easier. But hey, who wants to be stopped by doing things the easy way, right? So once the grass was in place, I came back and primed the surface with black primer. Then I came in with like a flat brown and hit it. And then I came back in with good old Tamiya buff to give it a little bit more of a dry soil look. Just kind of went around the stones and definitely got the pathway there where it's kind of worn down a little bit from people worshiping at this altar or whatever they do with this thing. And then once the ground was painted, I came back. This is again where I reversed the steps a little bit. I came back in with the greens to get the grass painted here. Now, I think in hindsight, what you want to do is paint the grass first and then get the ground because you get a lot of overspray with the green paint. I'll come back in and take care of that a little bit later with the enamels and enamel dirt pastes and things, which it worked out fine. But again, I think it's just a lot easier to paint the grass first. I did a variation on the greens here. Started with a dark green, worked up a little bit lighter greens, give it some different shades and tones. And somehow in all that airbrushing, I did not get anything on the rock, though I did get a little bit of buff on intentionally at the bottom just to show where dust gets kicked up and stuff on the bottom of the rock. I went in with kind of a reddish sandstone type color for these, and then after sleeping on it, I realized you probably don't have a lot of red sandstone piled around the fields of Northwest Europe. Now maybe you do, I don't know, but it just seemed a little awkward to me. Here's some of that enamel work I was telling you about. Just kind of filling in the ground, making sure I'm covering up where I've oversprayed some of the green paint there. Also giving it the ground some various shades of brown and dust colored, just to kind of, simulate some's a little drier than others. And just obviously if you go out and look at the dirt in your own yard, it's not all one monotone color. And that's what's so great about dirt. Another thing I did here too, and I didn't get video of it, I went in and painted a lot of those little stones that came with some of the groundwork scatter in there, just to give them a little bit more of a realistic tone. Again, you don't have monotone rocks scattered throughout the yard. There are shades of gray and red and orange and stuff like that. So you can kind of see that in the background here as I go through and dip and dot the various enamels here. My problem with dioramas is as I go through them, I get in a rush to finish it. I don't always rush through to finish it, but it kind of start like, you've got a lot of time with diorama stuff. Like you get one step done and then you've got to let it dry for 12 hours. And that always kind of interrupts the flow and your mojo a little bit, but it's all right. It's time to work on other stuff. So I said I was not too crazy about the red sandstone color on my flagstones here. So what I did was I came back with AK 3rd Gen French Blue, which is a really cool grayish bluish tone that I think works well for a base color on rocks like this. And I just went back and painted them all with this. Another thing I did too with these stones, like I mentioned the not as dense foam, using the not as dense foam as I would have liked to have used for that. So what I did here before I came back with the grayish paint was I covered those with a layer of diluted PVA glue. And that kind of just fills in some of those pores a little bit and makes it so it's not quite as porous as it would be if you didn't cover it up with something. And with these kind of stones, you got to make sure you get the edges too. It's tempting to leave the edges, but then you're going to have weird colored stones and you don't want that. Now once those were painted and dry, I came back in with that Tamiya black enamel panel line wash. And I just kind of, washed over the rocks. There are a lot of cracks and crevices in there. Wanted to make sure I got the shadows in there and darkened them a little bit. And then once that was on and dry to the touch, I came back and cleaned it up a little bit with thinner. Now once the enamel was on there and washed away and dry, I came back with some ivory paint and kind of did just sort of a little bit of blending, a little bit of dry brushing, just to kind of give those rocks a little bit more tonality to it like that. You're getting a sneak peek here a little bit. I wanted to I didn't go step by step here. I wanted to kind of save some of the weird stuff for the latter part of this, but you can kind of see where I did some moss and stuff like that too. And with the moss, I just used some, it's basically flocking that you would use for like model railroads and other diorama stuff, but I just had one of those, pre-packaged moss texture things from Ammo, and I just dropped some white glue and came in with the moss and popped a little moss on top of it. And now, what is an occult alien monolith without some magic runes on it? So I came in with a brush and some white paint and just made up some weird looking shapes for my runes. I don't know what they mean. Maybe they do mean something. Maybe somewhere out in space, a spaceship is reading those and thinking that I'm calling to them or building them some sort of miniature monument. But that's not the case. Like I said, I just made up what I thought would look like weird runes. Runes. R-U-N-E-S. Runes. And there you go. Magical runes. Or occult runes. I don't know, whatever you want. And with that, it was time to make our magic orb. I just took some 2-part epoxy putty, cut it off, rolled it into a ball. Now when you roll it in your hands like that, it actually comes out as an egg shape. So I had to take the egg. Maybe the egg would have been better in hindsight, I don't know. But so I took the egg shape and then made it a little bit more of a spherical type shape. Not quite a perfect sphere, but I think it's good enough for some sort of mystical MacGuffin here. I gave it a base coat of Tamiya light gray, just to kind of make it a little bit of a primer coat for it. And then once that was dry, the next day I came in and just hit it with some of the titanium white for another base coat. And I went pretty heavy with it because I want to make sure it has a good bright base coat to it when I come back with the fluorescent yellow paint, because I want this to have sort of a glowing effect. I'm not a mini painter, so I haven't done a lot of work with glowing, or I haven't done any work with glowing effects before. So I just kind of improvised a little bit here. Once the white paint was dry, I came in with the AK fluorescent yellow. A few coats on that. I don't know exactly how many, but enough to really get it kind of heavy, a heavy application to it. Now, another thing with this too is because it is supposed to be glowing, I made sure to paint, lightly the back of it so it kind of looks like the light from the mystical orb is reflecting on the back of the black stone where it's sitting on. Or maybe it's floating on. I think floating's better. I'm pretty happy with it. It does look a little bit like a volleyball from phys ed class, but we're going to use our imagination here and pretend that it was something given to us by alien overlords who are promising to come back at a later date, once this whole brouhaha in northwestern Europe has been settled. I'm pretty happy with it for my first run at a sci-fi weird diorama like this. It certainly won't be my last. I'm going to ride out this weird thing for a little bit and scratch that itch and see what we get. So I hope you'll stay tuned and come back as we explore more weird war tales of our own here at Sprugu. My name's Ryan. Thanks for watching. If you have any other ideas for weird sci-fi horror dioramas, be sure to leave that in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. And check back later for more modeling content and some weird stuff too.